And we have to understand, like the word parousia, he appears, he's not like coming from somewhere else. When we say even him coming, it's like a pregnant woman going, my baby's coming. Well, the baby's right there. We take coming like he's somewhere else. But he's right here. And that's part of what the Eucharist expresses. He's right here. But see, it's, again, the partnership. It's a partnership. It's a partnership. That's what he's looking for. Not just do you believe in Jesus, like mentally, accept it. Are you living up? It's like a marriage. It's like a real marriage. And that's why Revelation is very sobering. And not, when's this going to happen, and who's Antichrist this week, and that's all basically, biblically speaking, saklamares, type of thing. It is to the church, look, Jesus is right here in the middle of your persecution. He's not gone. Yes, there is a battle going on, and you're part of it. And the people that hang in there are the ones who in the end will be rewarded. Those who try to live out the partnership to the fullest. And those whose churches, and again, it's very scary when you say, like I said, all 7 of those churches are gone. They're gone. It's not the buildings, folks. It's what the building house, does the building house actually Jesus for real, and the people who are married to him. Anything else? Yes?
Just out of curiosity, with the Bible series on the History Channel, did you find anything in that that was inconsistent or not?
Well, I felt for them because they're trying to cram.
Yes.
A lot. And some of it was a little like, I have to admit, I laughed at one point because it was actually after Jesus cleanses the money changers out, which the reason he's doing it is not because of the injustice of the guys cheating on the people with the currency exchange. I mean, he didn't like that either, but he did that as a sign to say the temple's done. Because when he did that, all the sacrifices stopped because he did more than turn over a few tables. Everything froze for that whatever hour it was to clean up the mess. Because animals ceased to be being brought into sacrifice because he ruined everything. Okay. But anyway, as he's leaving the temple, and I know he's got the temple authorities behind him, but he sees some kids. He walks up to one and he goes, with a smile, not one stone will be left upon another. You see these stones? Which is the prediction of the fall of Jerusalem. Well, I doubt it was like, hey kids, in 40 years, you're all going to go nuts and be killed and tortured and you're going to cannibalize each other. Isn't that great? He would have said it directly, which in the Gospels he says it to the disciples. So that part was like a little, as my kids would say, cheesy. But other than that, and aside from the fact Jesus looked too Caucasian, to be honest, he didn't look Semitic at all. These were dark people who lived in the sun. And keep in mind, back then, interracial marriage was not a big deal at all. That's only a 300-year phenomenon. Did you know that? They freely intermarried. The only thing you were not allowed, a slave was not allowed to marry a free person. Okay? I used to tease my mother that in the island of Crete, where my parents come from, we're right between mainland Greece and Egypt. And Egypt clearly was racially mixed. And when I look at some of my daughters, their hair is a little... And you know what? We delude ourselves about pure race and pure this. That's saklamares. They had that guy from England who, Armstrong, red hair, pale like you wouldn't believe. And they did the thing with his DNA. He's rooted in a pygmy tribe in the center of Africa. As Papa would have said, hockey smoke bullwinkle. Yeah, Father Alex.
Many people will ask, if Jesus defeated sin and death in his resurrection that we celebrate, why does suffering and the things written about Revelation continue?
And that is that is partly even tied to the question before about why some of the Jews didn't accept him. Because the way we're saved is by partnering with Jesus in the process. See, it's begun. It's like the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus are like the D-Day invasion. Hitler's back, any historian will tell you Hitler's back was broken then. Nazism was busted. It was just a matter of time. But the people in those different countries had the option of either siding with the Allies and furthering or just sitting back, or cooperating with the Nazis. But part of this is Paul's famous statement that the way we're saved is not just by him yanking us out, but by actually being with Jesus to further that. Paul says in Colossians, I make up in my own body what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ. Very powerful statement. Meaning, I am here, God brought me into existence, that to be in union with him meant I was going to be in this apprenticeship. So that our salvation is tied to how we apprentice and how we're married, how we live it out. Because it's through that suffering we become more like Jesus. Jesus gives himself over to suffering. Not in some weird passive way, but he gives himself over to it. Because, and we know this, for instance, people, who, if they respond, not that suffering in itself is necessarily good, but how we respond to suffering. And I find it makes some people more human and humane. There's something in the mystery of suffering that we're not complete if everything is just like we're living on Valium for 7, 8, 9 decades of our life. So there is something that, and this is the important part, that we're called to participate. And even Revelation is kind of like, you shouldn't be surprised at this. But you're part of the action. That's why the martyrs are reigning with Jesus. And reigning doesn't mean they're all sitting around watching satellite dish TV and having a good time. Reigning means that, because we know that Jesus is still working. He's furthering the invasion, but he has these people. And even we know as Orthodox, with the saints that pop up here and there, they're working. If you think when you die it's just going to be sitting around doing nothing, you're going to get in trouble. Because even in heaven they're crying. They're waiting for the end. Because it's only when Jesus appears that the tears are wiped away. See, we don't go to heaven right when we die. We're waiting for the completion. We're going to feel like something's... Even the people that die, they're cognizant, etc., but it's not. They know it's not done yet. They know it's not done. It's not done. And some of them, like the saints we know about who pop in and out, they're there to help further it. And the word disciple means to be an apprenticeship. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I'm being apprenticed to his technique, his craft, if you will, on his project. An apprentice didn't just sit around and do nothing. I don't know if that helps, Father Alex. So it's somehow in the mystery that if we don't participate in it with Jesus, we won't go through it and get to the other side the way Jesus did. Yes?
When you talk about partnership with Jesus, while we're here down on earth yet, do you mean, of course, we should follow the commandments, but sometimes we have trouble following every and each one of the commandments.
That's what metanin is for. I mean, the idea that when you fall, you get up again. But the problem is the world, we're living in a world that tries to make everything okay. I mean, even in the older generations, you know, where some cultures it was okay for the husband to go be immoral. I've been in villages, you know. Puno kiros andonis. And the wife knows. It was okay for men back then, in some places, in some people's minds. So we shouldn't be surprised that now it's gone even crazier, type of thing. But the problem is, do we repent? If we realize we're not living the way Jesus wants us to live, do we realize that he has given us the resources, even in this human existence, to be, that God himself is present in and activates, that we can change. See, guys, and change isn't all, it's like pregnancy. It's not all at once. Spiritual life is like a pregnancy. Some days you're feeling okay. Some days you can't get out of bed without the crackers. And even still. Okay? And then there's some days you feel great. And then as you guys know, the women know, as you get closer to the time of, it's more difficult. You need somebody to push you out of the bed, pull you out of a couch, da 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 da. And then you go into the actual labor, and it's like, wow, you know, this kind of thing. You know, and even if you know my wife, she's very sweet. She's the kind of person that would have wanted to make kururakia when she went into labor or to bring to the nurses. But when we got into labor, it was like a very different story type of thing. I love transition. Don't touch me. All right, okay. Don't touch my arm. This kind of thing. So, but that reflects like spiritual life. And what's happening though is birth. See, we think life is just this steady thing. It isn't. Birth is not steady. God is trying to constantly birth. And so when we don't do it, we have to understand that we can pick up, though. God will give us the ability, and this is what the church is supposed. The church is supposed to be the community that supports us. That if I'm struggling, I know within the system of this community, the structure of this community, I will receive support when I'm struggling. So I don't have to be embarrassed. Not that especially in a large parish, not everybody has to know everything, but we all struggle. The thing is whether when we fall down do we get up again. Because we'll fall down, sure. Chrysostom says the difference between a pig and a human being is not, both can fall into the mud and the stuff. Bravo. But sadly we have people go, basta. Let it go. Anything else?
Yes. It's very hard. You talked about the dualism between heaven and earth, and to get past that, and Jesus is here. And could you elaborate a little more on how Jesus has affected subatomic particles?
I'm not a physicist.
In terms of the creation.
Oh yeah.
Itself. And could you just elaborate?
Well, real quick, there's a mystery to creation that I'm not going to go into some big thing on physics. But there's a mystery to creation, just like there's nutrients and certain things in what we eat. In the same way, creation has elements God put already that He's simply waiting to energize with our cooperation and use a certain way. So it's already here in one sense. It's not fully developed. But it's like you take bread and wine. Bread and wine. But then, as a community, we come together to say, because Jesus is already present in us, we're going to uncover that presence in the bread and wine and bring bread and wine back to what it was meant to be used as a means of even physically connecting with Jesus and each other. To actually concretely express His presence. But sin is when we fracture that creation has no meaning there, except to fulfill my appetites. So, but the idea of there's realities that we haven't figured out that God Himself has put in. I mean, when you talk to a physicist, I mean, this is like, really, most people who are atheists are just debelides, they're lazy. Not only are they figuring out there was a time that matter did not exist, which blows the old Greek thing that matter was eternal, somehow it was always there, but it also, the fact that, where did light come from? There's no explanation for where light came from. If there's no matter, where did light come from? And as my father said, Holy Spirit have sense humor. I think we need to see, though, that reality, I'm not saying that creation is magical, but I'm saying there's something present, and God's waiting for us to cooperate, to partner with, to bring that back in. And I have to say this, too. And yes, I mentioned there have been crazy, nutty Christians, or people call themselves Christians throughout history, including among the Orthodox. But there's also, you look at some of the great things that have happened, it was because of people's religious perspective. A lot of the great reforms. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys know this. We, meaning Christians, there was no such thing as a hospital until Christianity came about. There was no such thing as orphanages. It was radical, treasonous in Rome to sit there and say that a slave was a full human being. That children weren't property. We got to kill these people. They're upsetting the societal balance of everything. That women are full human beings, which is something we've lost culturally as Orthodox. Okay, I'm not going to get into that, but I could. Okay, but anyway. Yes?
Father, cremation is becoming more and more popular.
Yes.
For many reasons. Where does the Orthodox Church stand on this topic?
Generally, we would say that Unless you're in a place like Japan where you can't get out of it. There's no place to bury people. They're so crowded. So you're forced to cremate. But you understand why. What I would suggest is the fact that, the church would say you would never deliberately destroy the body of another Christian.
Right.
If you were taking Jesus down from the cross, how would you have disposed of his body?
We say that the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, right?
So even when the person is dead, you guys know this, in an Orthodox funeral, we anoint the body. The body even still belongs to God. Not just the soul. That's why what we do with the body is important. You can't just say, well, in my heart I really believe. Right? Like the guy who's cheating on his wife. I really love you, honey, but in my heart I love you. Okay. So it is. What I would suggest, though, we need to go to green funerals, because the people who argue for cremation they do have a good point. Because the way we do what we do to the bodies, and this stuff with vaults and crazy stuff, this is nuts. It is a big. Do you know? I have some good friends who are funeral directors, but it's a multi-billion-dollar business. Okay. And people are made to buy these caskets, and it's like, who's going to remember that? As one old lady said, they would baulo, which I think of the word baulo as trunk, not just like a coffin, but anyway.
Yeah.
You know, really what they did, they kind of did in Greece, and still do in many places, is really, and there's places you can do this in, where you actually are put in a wooden coffin, and you go into, no vault, you go into the earth, and it's not a law, by the way, only the cemeteries. See, they like the vaults. It makes this. Okay, as long as the water tables are not affected, because I remember there's some cemeteries, you don't want, if the body decomposes, that it goes into the water. That's not good. That's how people got dysentery in the colonial periods and so forth. But there's places you don't have to worry about that. And the ideal would be just to put you back into the earth and let nature, quote, take its course. But the way we do funerals is like, oh. You know, I remember my poor aunt, when my yaya died, my grandmother, and she was usually a very steady, hard-nosed. You didn't mess with Aunt Mary. I mean, she's great. She loved you. She'd be loyal to you, but don't ever cross her the wrong way, type of thing. And here's my Aunt Mary, who, in her grief, got suckered into an airtight coffin. Who's going to open up? He must have got I mean, so the thing with funerals is, does it make sense? Is what the people who want cremation say, the way we do funerals is not Christian either. In a way, because what are you preserving? You're not letting it go back to the earth in a natural kind of way. And actually, if you look at the environment and other, so their argument is even about creation itself, about the environment and so forth. And in a way, it's true. You know, in that way. So, ideally speaking, we don't destroy the bodies deliberately. Ideally, though, it'd be nice if we could go back to the idea of having what they would call more green funerals. But I can tell you, a lot of funeral directors and cemeteries don't want that because they're going to lose income. Yes, Father Alex.
Father Dimitri, we just want to express thanks for your presence today and helping to shed some light on this often misunderstood book. And I think this presentation has come at an appropriate time for two reasons. One, we're right in the middle of Lent. And when you begin Lent, there's a great deal of enthusiasm. You're ready for this new chapter. And then when you're at the end of Lent, you're looking ahead towards Holy Week and you see the light at the end of the tunnel. But when you're right in the middle of Lent, it's sometimes a period where you struggle a little bit, or sometimes it's difficult to get through these middle days of Lent with the same enthusiasm as when we started. So this has come at a good time in the middle so that we can be rejuvenated for the remaining days of Lent. And I think it's also timely because as we approach Holy Week with the persecution, the sacrifice, everything that culminates in Jesus' earthly ministry comes all together during Holy Week. So I think so many of these symbols and so many of the commentaries that Father Dimitri made today are going to be thoughts that we have and call to mind during the many readings and the many days of Holy Week. So thank you for your presence. Thank all of you for being here this morning. May God continue to strengthen us during the remaining days of our Lenten journey.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.